Y'all ever heard about Bubba Wallace? We haven't talked about this on the show, so I'm going to touch on this. I'm not going to get too far into this because we all know, I think it's been beaten to death here, but Bubba Wallace, NASCAR driver, African-American driver, and he found a noose in his garage. It was a huge story, and it turns out it was not a noose. It was let me see what they actually call it. A federal investigation later revealed the rope was in fact a garage door pulled down rope and that it was not a racially motivated attack. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Bubba Wallace went full Jussie Smollett 2.0 and planted this noose and called everybody and set it up, or his team did, or I don't know, right? I have no idea. What I will say, though, is that I saw something that was kind of interesting. It was from a media member on Fox Sports Radio. And they said, it doesn't matter if it's a noose or not. What matters is that you could think it was a noose, which goes to show how racist society is. And I thought that was a really interesting notion, because it does matter if it's a noose or not. And the reason we live in this culture of this cancel culture and this, this very sensitive, very knee-jerk reaction culture is because of situations like this, where instead of people getting this news and be like, okay, well, let's investigate it, let's see what's going on. It's kind of weird. Like, how would a noose end up? Isn't that a little too on the nose? Like a noose hanging in the garage of the black driver when he's driving the Black Lives Matter car at the first event seems a little too time to killish, doesn't it? Seems a little too John Grisham. And say, let's just see what happens. And then you react. But immediately the media picking it up as it's a noose. This is racially insensitive. This is a hate act. This is something big, That's kind of like the problem. The problem is there's a lot of people who did not get that second part of the story. There's a lot of people who didn't get. I'll give you an example of how this works. I was talking to somebody yesterday. They were talking about a situation where a Black Lives Matter painting was covered up by another protest, and they missed that part of the story. So they thought the story was about outrage of the Black Lives Matter painting. And they didn't catch that the story was a protester painted over the Black Lives Matter painting, and the mayor of the city came out and said, oh, well, it's the same. Whether you're for it or against it, both have their right to protest. So we're not going to press charges against the people who originally painted the mural on the sidewalk, and we're not going to press charges against the people who painted over it. It's the same. And whether you're on one side or the other, we're in America because you can protest. And the person missed that part of the story, so they were upset at the original Black Lives Matter mural being painted on public property, and they were outraged. And that's how this works. There's a lot of people who did not get the second part of the story about it not being a noose. There's a lot of people who all they heard was noose hanging in black NASCAR driver's garage. And they left and they were like, NASCAR is racist. This is racist. There's nooses being hung in garages. This is a bad deal. So it is the media's job to not jump to these conclusions. I know it's hard, when you're trying to get clicks and you're trying to get clout. Look, nobody respects clout more than me. But at some point, I think people need to, or journalists or whatever, they have to quit stoking the flames. They have to quit driving this down people's throats, because it's just not true sometimes. And this is a situation where I don't blame Bubba, because unless Bubba planted it, but let's just say Bubba walks in and sees this news, right? Yeah, okay, he's probably, I can't even imagine the pressure and the stress that Bubba Wallace was under. Coming out as, saying all this stuff, driving the Black Lives Matter car, he probably felt really backed into a corner, okay? And he sees that noose, he may have reported it and said, oh, hey man, there's a noose hanging in my garage. Now, what makes it worse is he goes on Don Lemon's show, he goes on CNN, he does interviews at ESPN, and then it comes out that it's not a news. So he's got like 3 hours of interviews on major news publications saying, hey man, not a news, not a big deal. And now he has to backtrack and look like an idiot. I don't blame him for, I don't blame him for that. It's like if you hear a bump in the night at your house and you're freaked out and you call the police and the police show up and it turns out to be like a cat or something, on your roof. That's not a big deal. It's a bigger deal if you call the police and the police, the news reporter picks it up. News reporter sends 3 people to your house. You do a bunch of interviews while the police are searching. You're like, I don't know, it might be somebody, it might be something. All of a sudden the headlines are, unknown masked criminal on roof of house. And your neighbors wake up and your street lights come on. Your neighbors walk outside and everyone's outside your house. You got 70 people outside your house right now looking at you. And then it turns out to be the cat. And now you got to walk back everything, and it's super embarrassing. You don't blame the person. You blame the journalist who picked up the story, who made it something more than it was. And that's how this Bubba Wallace thing is. I think it's super embarrassing. The sad part is, and this ties into kind of what we talked about last week, but the sad part is this totally nullified Bubba's whole thing. Like, it should have been good enough that Bubba Wallace is an African-American driver at NASCAR in a very tough spot, in a very tough time where Black Lives Matter is a thing, and he's riding a Black Lives Matter car. That's it. It should just be that. It shouldn't be, oh, well, he's a shit driver, or, did you know he found a noose? Did you know that? He found a noose in his garage, so now it's a really big deal. You don't need extra sauce. You should just be good with what it was. And again, I'm not saying someone planned it, but I'm saying, no matter what happened, you don't need that extra thing. So now, his original thing is just eliminated. He could have done really good things. He could have done stuff. He could have really had an impact. But now people are just going to associate him with Jussie Smollett. People are just going to not listen to him. And it's sad. But a lot of the times these movements kind of cannibalize themselves because of situations like this. And whether it's Bubba's fault or whether it's maybe somebody who planted the noose without him knowing it, or maybe it was a joke, or maybe it's just on the news. But it's unfortunate.